White House explains thinking behind Ukraine weapons deliveries. President Joe Biden will reportedly announce more military aid for Kiev after meeting his Vladimir Zelenskyy at the G7 summit in Japan. The U.S. is providing weapons to Ukraine in a manner designed to avoid a major direct escalation with Russia, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan claimed on Saturday. President Joe Biden's core precept is that we are going to do everything we can to support Ukraine in its defense of its sovereignty and territorial integrity, Sullivan said during a press conference on the sidelines of the G7 summit in the Japanese city of Hiroshima. While providing this aid, Washington is going to proceed in a way that avoids World War III. That precept has remained intact, he stated. The press conference saw a number of questions about the possible supply of F-16 fighters to Kiev. On Friday, Biden told the G7 leaders that Washington would support an effort by the UK, the Netherlands, and other European countries to train Ukrainian pilots to fly the US-made jets. As the training unfolds in the coming months, we will work with our allies to determine when planes will be delivered, who will be delivering them, and how many, Sullivan explained. For months, the U.S. had rejected Ukraine's push for F-16s, and the senior official was asked to explain the change in the Biden administration's stance on the issue. Washington is providing the Ukrainian military with the equipment that is required at a given point in time, he said. According to Sullivan, the warplanes were not essential while Kiev was planning for spring and summer offensive operations. But now we've reached a moment where it is time to look down the road and to say, what is Ukraine going to need as part of a future force to be able to deter and defend against Russian aggression as we go forward? He added. Sullivan said the F-16 fighter jets were part of that mix. Any future delivery of the planes to Ukraine would not conflict with the basic proposition that the U.S. is not enabling or supporting attacks on Russian territory, he maintained. Politico reported on Friday that Biden was expected to announce another $375 million military aid package for Kiev after a meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart Vladimir Zelenskyy in Hiroshima over the weekend. It will include more artillery shells, armored vehicles, and anti-tank weapons, according to U.S. and Ukrainian officials. Moscow has repeatedly condemned the delivery of weapons to Ukraine by the U.S. and its allies, arguing that they only prolong the fighting and raise the risk of what it terms a proxy war waged by the West. The Kremlin has also said the supplies increase the chance of a direct confrontation between Russia and NATO. 3 takeaways from the China Central Asia Summit. The China Central Asia Summit concluded in Xi'an, northwest China's Shaanxi province, on Friday. During the summit, leaders of China and Central Asian countries signed and released the Xi'an Declaration of the China Central Asia Summit and adopted a list of summit outcomes. Here are 3 takeaways from the summit. Building a closer China-Central Asia community with a shared future. According to the declaration, both sides agreed that China maintains fruitful all-round cooperation with the 5 Central Asian countries, which serves the fundamental interests of the 6 countries and their peoples. The 6 countries are determined to work together to rise to challenges and foster a closer China-Central Asia community with a shared future. Taking the summit as an opportunity, a mechanism for meetings among the heads of state of China and Central Asian countries has been officially established, with the 2 sides, China and Central Asian countries, taking turns to host the biennial summit. All parties will accelerate the building of the China Central Asia mechanism, establish a ministerial meeting mechanism as soon as possible in key and priority areas of cooperation, and give full play to the role of their foreign ministries, it said. Hailing the significance of jointly building the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, in leading international cooperation, the 6 countries agreed to coordinate their respective development strategies with the BRI. Closer cooperation. Recognizing the huge potential in cooperation between China and Central Asia, the 6 countries decided to comprehensively increase the scale of trade and expand cooperation in emerging fields such as digital trade and the green economy, according to the declaration. All parties are willing to promote the cooperation and development of infrastructure and engineering construction, accelerate the connectivity of digital and green infrastructure, and jointly advance the sustainable development of cooperation in infrastructure and engineering construction, it said. The 6 countries agreed to hold the Forum on Industrial and Investment Cooperation between China and the 5 Central Asian countries on a regular basis. Upgrade the investment agreements between China and the Central Asian countries, and encourage the expansion of industrial cooperation to enhance the level of regional industrial development. They also vowed to speed up the construction of the cross-border railway that connects China, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. In terms of green development, they agreed to accelerate the modernization and building of existing port facilities for implementing Green Channel fast clearance of agricultural and sideline products at all border ports between China and the Central Asian countries. All parties will take effective measures to raise the cross-border freight volume to build an all-round, complex, three-dimensional, low-carbon, and sustainable transportation infrastructure system between China and Central Asia. In agriculture, the 6 countries vowed to tap the potential of agricultural cooperation to promote trade in agricultural and livestock products. They are willing to actively develop smart agriculture, strengthen the application of water-saving, green, and other efficient technologies, and exchange advanced experience. Stressing the importance of jointly improving policies for reducing poverty, increasing employment and income, and creating jobs, the 6 countries agreed to strengthen cooperation in the above-mentioned fields, introduce effective policies, and carry out expert and business exchanges. Supporting the building of a China-Central Asia Energy Development Partnership, they pledged to expand cooperation in the energy industry chain and further expand cooperation in traditional energy fields such as oil, natural gas, and coal. China has invited Central Asian countries to participate in the Cultural Silk Road program to promote people-to-people bonds. A more stable, thriving and prosperous Central Asia. The 6 countries agreed to jointly crack down on the 3 forces of terrorism, separatism and extremism, drug trafficking, transnational organized crime, cybercrime, and other activities, according to the declaration. Noting that security and development are the prominent issues facing the international community today, the Central Asian countries hailed the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative and the Global Civilization Initiative, and vowed to participate in each. All parties are willing to strengthen dialogue and cooperation within multilateral mechanisms such as the United Nations, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia, and exchange views and coordinate positions on regional and international hotspot issues in a timely manner. Russian envoy to U.S., emerging economies to turn backs on Washington due to sanctions harm. Russian ambassador to the United States Anatoly Antonov says that emerging economies will understand the harm of Washington's current policy, in what concerns sanctions, to their vital interests and will turn away from the U.S. Doesn't the U.S. administration understand that with its steps it is damaging its own long-term goals? Clearly, emerging economies will see the harm that the policy of the United States is doing to their vital interests and will turn their backs on Washington, Antonov said in a comment to reporters posted on the Russian diplomatic mission's Telegram channel. The ambassador said that the new package of sanctions reiterates what has already been done and contains no real new measures, adding that Washington's intention is to try to scare off partners from the Russian market, to confuse the business circles, experts, and the public. Convince them that we are under some kind of cap of restrictions. Of course, this is far from being true, he said. Russia, not in words, but in action, has proved its ability to cope with attempts to stop its progress, to force it to give up its basic principles. On Friday, the U.S. Departments of Treasury and State announced a new massive package of Russia-related sanctions against more than 300 persons, including 46 individuals, hundreds of entities in more than 20 countries and dozens of aircraft and vessels. Wave of depression sweeps across U.S. as 29% of adults say they've been diagnosed. The United States is facing a troubling wave of depression, with the rate of adults who have been diagnosed at some point soaring to 29%, an alarming increase of nearly 10 percentage points since 2015, according to a new Gallup poll. Today, almost 1 in 5 Americans, 17.8%, are grappling with depression, signifying a 7-point surge within the same period. This is an all-time high since Gallup began monitoring depression in 2015. The sting of depression is felt most deeply among women, young adults, and Black and Hispanic adults. Women, in particular, are facing a storm of emotional turmoil, with a staggering 36.7% admitting to a lifetime diagnosis of depression, almost double the rate of men. Similarly, adults aged between 18 to 44 are weathering a mental health crisis, revealing considerably higher rates of diagnosis and treatment. This surge in depression isn't confined to the U.S. borders either. Around the globe, close to 40% of adults over the age of 15 are fighting a battle with severe depression or anxiety, or are emotionally vested in the struggles of a loved one facing the same. Researchers believe that the COVID-19 pandemic, with the social isolation, fear, and psychological exhaustion it brought, has left an indelible mark on our collective mental health, fueling this wave of depression. China boycotts G20 event in Kashmir. Beijing says officials will not travel to the disputed territory. China will skip an upcoming G20 event in the Indian-controlled part of disputed Kashmir, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said on Friday. Saudi Arabia and Turkey have also decided to not attend the Kashmir event, Indian news channel NDTV reported. China firmly opposes holding any form of G20 meetings on disputed territory. We will not attend such meetings, Wang said at a press conference. The G20 Tourism Working Group session will be held on May 22nd to 24th in Srinagar as part of a series of events tying into the G20 Leaders Summit in New Delhi in September. According to Indian media, around 60 delegates are expected to attend the meeting. In 2019, India reorganized the Muslim-majority state of Jammu and Kashmir into two separate entities, prompting strong protests from neighboring Pakistan, which views the region as illegally occupied by India. Beijing and New Delhi have a territorial dispute in the Himalayas, where soldiers from both sides have engaged in several bloody skirmishes along a de facto border since 2020. In February, Indian and Chinese officials met in person for the first time in more than 3 years in an effort to defuse the tensions. During his trip for the G7 summit in Japan on Friday, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said relations with Beijing must be based on mutual respect. Peace and tranquility in the border areas are essential for normal bilateral ties with China, Modi told Nikkei Asia. At the same time, he said that India is ready to defend its sovereignty and dignity. Arab League holds summit with surprise attendee Zelenskyy and return of Assad. At the recent Arab League summit in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad was warmly welcomed back after being cut off from most of the Arab community for over 10 years. He was met with open arms by leaders who were once against him, including Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The warming ties may signal a new approach to dealing with Assad. However, the feeling is not shared by all, as some Western countries and many Syrians still consider him a war criminal. Assad spoke with other leaders, such as Egypt's Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Tunisian President Kais al-Saied. These interactions further showed his return to the Arab community. However, Qatar's Emir, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, who previously called Assad a war criminal, left before Assad spoke. Syrian news reported a brief talk between the two, but other news organizations did not confirm it happened. In an unexpected move, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy also attended the summit before he headed to the G7 in Japan. Zelenskyy presented a 10-point peace plan to the delegates and asked for support for Ukraine in its conflict with Russia. He also thanked Saudi Arabia for past assistance. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince signaled his readiness to mediate between the two nations. Despite the mounting pressure from the West on Gulf oil producers to isolate Russia, the Gulf states have attempted to maintain neutrality in the Ukrainian conflict. Russia, like these states, is a member of OPEC+. Erdogan, Turkey does not intend to indulge all Western demands. Turkey does not plan to fulfill all the demands made by the West, particularly in what concerns imposing sanctions against Russia, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said. Erdogan received 49.24% of the votes in the first round of the presidential election held earlier this month, while his main competitor, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, got 45.07%, according to data from the Supreme Election Council. Kılıçdaroğlu has accused Russia of alleged meddling in the elections in Turkey. The opposition says it will rebuild Turkey's relations with other countries. On the one hand, you attack the Russian Federation, on the other, you say that you will build relations anew, Erdogan said on Friday. The Turkish president pointed out that Ankara currently maintains relations with all Western countries, including the US, as well as Russia and China. As for the sanctions against Turkey's largest trading partner, Russia, the opposition said that they would do everything demanded by the West. By Kemal, Turkey will do what we want, not what the West demands. This will never happen in our politics, Erdogan said. Turkey held parliamentary and presidential elections on May 14. After counting 100% of the ballots, the Turkish Supreme Election Council announced on Monday that the second round of the presidential vote would take place on May 28, as none of the candidates had reached the 50% threshold. During the 2020 campaign, U.S. President Joe Biden promised to support the Turkish opposition should he win the U.S. presidential election, and called Erdogan an autocrat. In response, Turkish presidential spokesman Ibrahim Kalin accused Biden of ignorance, arrogance, and hypocrisy. U.S. to allow Allied transfers of F-16s to Ukraine, media. The American-made warplanes have long been on Kiev's wish list. The U.S. government will not block Allied countries from sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, multiple news outlets reported on Friday, citing American officials. Sources cited by the Washington Post, CNN, NBC, and other outlets said the White House is prepared to allow F-16 shipments after months of Ukrainian requests for the aircraft, which is used by more than 24 nations. A senior White House official told NBC that Washington had already informed its partners about the decision. Speaking to reporters on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Hiroshima, Japan on Saturday, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said, "In the coming months, we will work with our allies to determine when the planes will be delivered, who will be delivering them, and how many." UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced earlier that London would back the creation of an international coalition to supply the F-16s and other aircraft to Kiev. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy met with Sunak this week and lobbied for Western fighter jets, insisting they are needed for Kiev's much-touted counter-offensive. The U.S. military is currently training Ukrainian pilots to fly F-16s. However, Washington has so far declined to provide its own warplanes to Kiev. Moscow has warned against supplying Kiev with weapons, arguing that it will only prolong the fighting and do little to deter its military objectives. The Kremlin has also said that military support for Ukraine, which includes the training of troops and sharing of intelligence, makes Western countries de facto direct parties in the conflict. U.S. and Israeli envoys clash over Soros. Washington thinks criticizing the financier is anti-Semitic, while the Israeli government thinks supporting him is anti-Semitic. The U.S. and Israeli anti-Semitism envoys have taken opposing positions on whether supporters or critics of Jewish financier George Soros is anti-Semitic. The argument kicked off when Twitter CEO Elon Musk compared Soros to a cartoon supervillain. In a tweet on Monday, Musk said that Soros reminds him of Magneto, a mutant supremacist scientist from Marvel's X-Men universe. When a commenter pointed out that Magneto was depicted, like Soros, as a Holocaust survivor and that both have good intentions, Musk doubled down. "You assume they have good intentions," he wrote. "They are not. He wants to erode the very fabric of civilization. Soros hates humanity." Musk was quickly accused of anti-Semitism, with Anti-Defamation League CEO Jonathan Greenblatt declaring that by comparing the billionaire to a Jewish supervillain, Musk would embolden extremists. The Israeli government disagrees. The Israeli government and the vast majority of Israeli citizens see Elon Musk as an amazing entrepreneur and a role model, Diaspora Affairs Minister Amichai Chikli tweeted on Thursday. Adding that criticism of Soros, who finances the most hostile organizations to the Jewish people and the State of Israel, is anything but anti-Semitism, quite the opposite. Soros has donated more than $32 billion to liberal political causes through his Open Society Foundation's NGO, and was the largest donor in last year's midterm elections in the U.S., gifting $128 million to Democratic Party candidates and organizations. Soros funds a number of Palestinian activist groups that accuse the Israeli state of war crimes, and several international organizations that promote boycotts of Israeli goods and sanctions against its leaders. In the U.S., the Biden administration sided with its leading donor against Chikli's criticism. Irrespective of how one feels about George Soros's politics or policies, it is entirely disingenuous to deny that many ad hominem attacks on him rely on classic anti-Semitic tropes and rhetoric, U.S. Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism Deborah Lipstadt tweeted on Friday. In bygone eras, the anti-Semites invoked the Rothschild family to advance their conspiracies about Jews. Today they use Soros to do so, she declared. Neither Soros nor his Open Society foundations have responded to Musk's comments. Asked on Tuesday whether he was worried his controversial tweets would drive advertisers away from Twitter, Musk told CNBC News, "I don't care. I'll say what I want to say, and if the consequences are losing money, so be it." North Korea, joint us. South Korean drills put region on brink of explosion. The situation in Korea has been heating up recently as South Korea and the United States have repeatedly run war games in the region. North Korea has responded with missile tests and demonstrations that their weapons can reach not only Seoul but also Japan and other regions. North Korea warned on Friday that joint military exercises between South Korea and the United States are pushing the region close to armed conflict. An article published in state-owned North Korean media says the peninsula is on the brink of explosion, and that the joint military exercises have become more undisguised and dangerous. In Nature, the outlet also said that an exercise for annihilating a nuclear power is just sheer bullshit. South Korea and the United States are set to begin their largest military exercise ever, taking place in 5 phases from May 25th to June 15th. It will involve forces in the air, sea, and land and will include F-35A fighter jets, A-64 Apache helicopters, various tanks and multiple rocket launchers. It will also mark the 70th anniversary of the alliance between South Korea and the United States, and the 75th anniversary of South Korea's military. The North Korean article, titled "No End to the Ceaseless War Move," states it is a legitimate right of a sovereign country to equip itself with more powerful self-defensive means in order to cope with the prevailing grave situation and prospective threats. The frantic nuclear war move of the United States and the South Korean puppet warmongers will invite corresponding counteraction, it goes on to warn. In April, the White House announced the Washington Declaration, an agreement between South Korea and the United States on nuclear deterrence, which the article described as a nuclear threat and blackmail against the DPRK Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The United States has insisted its military drills are not meant to provoke North Korea and are instead intended to demonstrate its commitment to protect its ally from potential North Korean